This is an examination of the hidden human condition.
This is the Hidden Killers Podcast.
With Tony Bruschi.
Lori Hellis is joining us. She's a retired criminal defense attorney. She's writing a book right now on the case of Lori Vallow Daybell. I want to get your opinion. We were talking yesterday about, from a defense attorney standpoint, what was missing, what could have been done better. But I'm curious to get your opinion as a writer now, as a human being. What do you think about how all of this played out? What has been your opinion on the culpability of Lori Vallow for the deaths of the children? Was this all in the hands of Alex Cox, her brother, and Chad Daybell, or was she intimately involved?
Well, there's no question in my mind that Lori was culpable in the murders of her children and of Tammy Daybell, and very likely in the murder of her fourth husband, Charles Vallow. So, I mean, I don't doubt that she was culpable in that. I think that in many ways, she was seeking what Chad was putting down. It's clear from the record that that several years before her meeting with Chad, she was reading books by authors that were contemporaries of Chad's, that were people who believed the same sorts of offbeat LDS doctrine. And she was in that seeking mode. She had read all Chad's books. She had read all Jason Mau's books. She had read a lot of other books by people who share similar beliefs. And I think she was kind of ripe for the picking when Chad came along, because she was ready to accept what he was teaching and what he was espousing in his books.
Let me ask you this, because when we talk about what his teachings were and what his professing to be this prophet, professing to be able to have these conversations, have these past lives, be buddies with Jesus, and, sit down for a beer and everything's wonderful. Do you think Chad believes his stories, or do you think Chad started amping up his stories once he got the pretty girl that he always wanted, and he noticed, kind of going along and believing anything he was saying? Did he just keep going down the rabbit hole because she's almost encouraging it and he could see that she's really getting into this? Or do you think Chad's just as nuts and really truly thinks he's this prophet type figure and is having conversations with God and was these people?
I think there was a point when Chad started to believe his own BS, to be honest.
Yep.
And I think it came before Lori, although I think his relationship with Lori certainly amplified it. It came when he published a book by an author named Julie Rowe, and she claimed to have had near-death experiences, and claimed that she had visions of the future and of the coming tribulation and the return of Jesus Christ, while she was in the throes of these near-death experiences. And Chad published her book in his small independent publishing company, and it garnered some success and some interest within the LDS communities. And it wasn't very long after that Chad announced that he had had his own near-death experiences and was having his own visions of the tribulation, and that and announced that all of the things that he had previously in his book said was fiction. He was now saying all of those things were really his visions of what was coming.
Was it a financial move? Was it she's doing this and I'm saying this works and it's a hell of a lot more successful than my books? Excuse me.
Yeah. I think in part it was financial.
Yeah.
But I think it also was that Chad really he's really quite a sociopath and quite involved in his own mind in being someone who is incredibly successful. So sure, I think that it was to bring attention to his own books and to himself and to elevate himself and to make him seem more to sort of pad his credentials, so to speak, and his credibility in the community. So sure, I think it was all of those things.
What is your take on where you think this will be going for Chad in the future? There's obviously more trials to talk about now that the other charges have been brought against Lori. But I want to talk about Chad with this. Obviously, his trial is upcoming. We don't have a date for it yet, either later this year or early next. Where do you think it's going to go? Is this going to be a quick repeat, open and shut, because so many things were revealed in Lori's trial? Or is this going to be a whole other ball of insanity that we've not yet heard?
Well, I think in many ways it's going to be a repeat of what we've heard in Lori's case, because all of the discovery was the same for both. And the state intended to try them together up until quite recently. So I don't think that we're going to get any big bombshells coming out of Chad's part of this trial. I do think that there is a good chance that we could be looking at a plea. I think they're going to wait until Lori's sentenced, and then they're going to take a hard look at whether or not it would be appropriate to offer him a similar plea. The prosecution doesn't want to try this case again. It was incredibly expensive for a very small jurisdiction. And I've been told they didn't get any help from the state in covering the costs. And so I don't think they want to retry it if they don't have to. I think there are some sincere and serious questions about equal protection if they pursue the death penalty for him after having been taken off the table for her. So I think there's at least a 50-50 chance, maybe a little better, that he will enter a plea once she has been sentenced.
Something to the effect of, we will not put you to death if you plead guilty?
Yeah, I think that's probably as good as he's going to get, will be a life without parole.
What do you see happening for Lori here in these other cases? Now that there's the charge of attempted murder on Brandon Boudreaux, there's now the charge of murder for her former husband, Charles Vallow, in Arizona. Obviously, different states, different jurisdictions, different rules of what can and cannot be applied to a trial. I know death is not going to be on the table there. Right. But where do you see this going in terms of another trial for Lori? Are we going to see another trial for Lori, quite honestly?
You know, I don't know at this point. I would say it's probably unlikely. But it makes perfect sense from a prosecutorial standpoint, because you always want to have the belt and suspenders approach. So Arizona has been sort of sitting back and waiting to see what happened in Idaho. But if possible, you always want to layer charges so that you are sure you keep that person in jail. In Lori's case, there are certainly going to be appeals on her conviction here in Idaho. And, you know, although we can speculate, we don't know until that appeal finally is decided several years from now, whether that conviction is going to stand. And there is at least a remote chance that the Idaho Supreme Court could remand it for retrial or could overturn the conviction. And in order to protect against her being released at any point, I think it makes perfect sense to have those Arizona charges waiting in the wings.
Just in case.
I don't know whether she will resolve those cases without trial or not. I think that going into this trial, she was adamant that she was not going to plead to any charges, and that she was innocent, and that this was simply a bump in the road, and this was a test from God, and God was going to free her. So I don't know if that has changed for her, and if she is looking differently at the charges in Arizona than she looked at the Idaho charges.
How do you think she's looking at life in general right now? Do you think she's still very much believing that, she always had the look on her face of, I know something you don't know. And
Absolutely.
It's very much, she's in this world of, she's being persecuted, but it's all for the good and she'll eventually die and God will take care of it. Do you think she's still in that state and not back into any form of reality? I truly wonder if she ever will be back into any form of reality.
I absolutely believe that to this moment, she believes that she is a goddess, that she is to head the 144,000, that Chad is her prophet, and that she will continue to be faithful because she believes that would be that to renounce that would, in her own words, put her soul at risk. So I don't believe she will ever change her mind about that. And for me, this case has brought up this question: when does a fervent religious belief become religious delusion? Where's the line? And I don't think that we have yet to parse that out for Lori.
No, I mean, and it's an interesting thing because with any sort of religious beliefs, it relies on faith. It relies on you believing in something that really can't truly be proven. Now, obviously, you can't kill people in your religions. That's a big no-no in most of them. But other than the murders, if you were just to talk about the things that they were saying I heard this voice from God, or God told me this, or all of the testimony that they had regarding their belief system and their connections directly to God, it's not that far off from most other religions. And granted, they weren't necessarily talking about the same sort of things, but it was the same sort of, and I'm not trying to offend anybody religious, magical thinking, where it's just, you got to rely on faith to believe that what I'm telling you is true. And that is an interesting one, because you add murder to the mix of almost any sort of religion and say, well, God told me to do this. Most of what you kind of led up to there with is just accepted as, well, that's their belief system. That's their faith. You got to respect it.
Well, sure. I mean, history is replete with examples of people who took their direction from God.
Sure.
From Joan of Arc down to Lori Vallow.
Yeah.
The question is when does that belief roll over into a diagnosable DSM-5 condition?
Sure.
And from the legal standpoint, then, how do her lawyers tease that out and decide, well, our client really isn't competent, or our client really isn't sane, versus she just has a very deeply held religious belief. And they have been respectful of her and her ability and her right to choose the path of her defense. So, yeah, I'm sure that it was a very frustrating exercise for both of those lawyers, and I empathize with both of them.
This is an examination of the hidden human condition
This is the Hidden Killers podcast.
with Tony Bruschi.
Lori Hellis, dear retired criminal defense attorney, thank you so much for your insight. She's following this case in depth as well. She's writing a book on it right now. If you want to learn more about her work, you can check out her website, thelorivallowstory.com. If you want to follow more of our conversation with her, because there's more to come in the coming days, press subscribe wherever you download podcasts to get access to all of that. If you want an ad-free experience, which I highly encourage you to get, just go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe to our show there. You'll get access to everything ad-free and all of our podcasts as well. It's not just this one. You can see all of them in our family there when you go to our subscription page and check out the True Crime Today family. There's many shows for you to binge on. My name's Tony Bruschi. Stay with us.